Yo, a $722 billion asset manager just told the world's largest country to adopt Bitcoin. This is a country that has 1.4 billion people and a GDP of $35 trillion. So what analyst am I talking about? I'm talking about Bernstein. Bernstein also predicted that in 2025, Bitcoin, they believe that Bitcoin will hit $200,000 per coin. So what does Bernstein know that you don't? Well, could it be the recent election of Donald Trump and the proposed strategic reserve on a federal level? And now, shout out to Dennis Porter, the potential strategic reserve on a state level, causing this domino effect of mass nation state adoption on a worldwide scale. And Bernstein could be advising India, which is the country, to jump on the train just in case, so they don't get left behind. Anyways, this is huge. This is massive. India is a massive country with a lot of people, a lot of economic power. So we're going to get into the Bernstein news and the press release that they released. But again, like we emphasized on yesterday's episode with Seth for privacy, there's two things in Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin as the investment, and then there's Bitcoin as the revolution, which is what we are all here for, which is the inevitable separation of money and state, which I believe will make the world a better place. Anyways, I'm joined here with my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields, and our special guest for today, Beautyon. He has some of the best takes on Twitter, and he is the founder of Azteco. Beautyon, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here again, Nico and Opti.
Opti, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing wonderful. I think anyone that's been at Simply Bitcoin knows how much I love Beautyon. So this is a gift to me on the show, but you guys are going to be exposed to, I think, some killer takes from Beautyon today. So if you're new to the show and you're not familiar with Beautyon's work, this one's going to be a great show. I'm always excited to hear Beautyon talk. So today's going to be epic. Anyways, Nico, let's get into it. Let's get into these stories.
Absolutely. So let me pull it up. This is the official kind of press release from Bernstein. Bernstein said, "Dear India investors, Bitcoin is now a strategic asset. Should India miss out?" What's really interesting is that Bitcoin is not yet a strategic reserve asset. So again, do they know something that we don't? I mean, part of the GOP policy in the United States is to create a positive regulatory environment, not only for self-custody, but for the Bitcoin mining industry. In the last couple months alone, again, Trump made his famous announcement at the Bitcoin 2024 conference, talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Polymarket currently gives the odds of that happening about roughly 35%. And of course, the recent news that came out in the last couple weeks or so with Dennis Porter saying that on a state level, up to 10 states are interested in making Bitcoin part of their treasury. And of course, I'm assuming all of this is happening because they're seeing what Nayib Bukele has done with El Salvador with their, putting Bitcoin on the treasury, and they're seeing the performance of MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is the best performing stock. And what Seth said yesterday was kind of funny. What does MicroStrategy do as a company, right? I love the way that he framed that. We know they're a software company, but it wasn't a very well-known company in general until they adopted a Bitcoin strategy. And now they've broken officially into the top 100 companies in the world, which is absolutely massive. So let's get to some of this news. This is the headline: Bernstein urges India to recognize Bitcoin as strategic asset. Investment firm Bernstein believes it's time for India to view Bitcoin as a strategic asset. With Bitcoin now worth $1.5 trillion globally and delivering an impressive 50% annual return over the last 4 years, Bernstein argues that India should not ignore its potential. The firm argues that India's regulators need to create a policy that treats Bitcoin not just as a, quote, private currency, but as a viable, quote, store of value in times of global economic uncertainty. Bernstein suggests that Indian asset managers should step up to offer secure and regulated ways for people to invest in Bitcoin. Many Indian investors today face the risk of losing money on unregulated crypto exchanges, and Bernstein sees a chance for Indian companies to lead in creating safer investment options. Quote, should Indian retail and institutional investors not gain access to regulated crypto products without risk of losing custody? Quote, in its report, Bernstein also highlights financial moves made by the United States where Bitcoin is getting new attention. With crypto-friendly President Donald Trump, who has big plans to make US a global leader in Bitcoin, the US could soon treat Bitcoin as a strategic asset. Bernstein believes that as the world's fifth largest economy, India shouldn't miss the chance to benefit from Bitcoin as well. Currently, India's government focuses on CBDCs and labels Bitcoin as, quote, private crypto, which Bernstein says limits its potential. The firm explains that the CBDC could help expand India's digital economy, but it doesn't replace what Bitcoin could do as digital gold. I disagree with that, by the way. Bernstein points out that India has significantly increased its gold reserves over the past decade, and it could do the same with Bitcoin without relying on foreign gold storage. Globally, companies like BlackRock and Fidelity have already launched Bitcoin ETFs, bringing in over $55 billion in assets just 10 months after launch. Bernstein believes India's leaders need to move fast on Bitcoin policy. And I think this is what Max Kaiser coined the global hash war, where you're going to see countries all around the world, once they start realizing Bitcoin's superior incentives and monetary properties, they're going to start aping in. And this is something that we've already seen. For example, the Kingdom of Bhutan holds 12,207 Bitcoin, or about 1.14 billion worth in US dollars. Bhutan's 2023 GDP was 2.9 billion. So if Bitcoin hit another 2.5x from here, Bhutan's Bitcoin stack will be about the same as its annual GDP. So Bhutan literally aped in. I mean, look, guys, a couple takes here, and I know that Beautyon's going to agree with me. The way that Bernstein framed it, which is, you know, we need regulations, we need regulated crypto exchanges. You know, retail's going to miss out, investors are going to miss out. The way that I see it is very simple. Bitcoin is the most beneficial towards individuals. So the question is not so much is India's government adopting Bitcoin. The question is, are the individuals of India adopting Bitcoin, and are they taking that said Bitcoin into self-custody? And if a significant percentage of those people, let's say 5 to 10% of 1.4 billion people, that's a lot of people that own Bitcoin and are empowering themselves, taking back their financial sovereignty by buying Bitcoin, earning Bitcoin, mining Bitcoin, and taking that said Bitcoin into self-custody. However, if India, for whatever reason, does decide to, you know, follow in the footsteps of Bhutan and say, hey, we need a nation state treasury strategy, I think that's very, very bullish for the price, but not so bullish for the revolution. Anyways, Beautyon, I want to get your takes on this. Is this just noise? Because I mean, we're seeing this on an international level. Russia kind of rolled back their Bitcoin mining ban. Of course, you have Donald Trump talking about the United States strategic reserve asset. Of course, you have the Kingdom of Bhutan, forgive my words, going balls deep. You have El Salvador, you know, of course, with their Bitcoin strategy. What's your take on this, Beautyon?
Well, look, the idea that that's wrong with many of these people, what they're saying is they're pigeonholing Bitcoin into one thing. They're saying it's a strategic asset, it's digital gold. And of course, these latecomers into the idea of Bitcoin bring with them their legacy system and their legacy thinking and superimpose it on top of Bitcoin to help them understand it and contextualize it. And that, of course, is not the way that the reality works. Bitcoin is not a strategic asset. Bitcoin is not digital gold. Bitcoin is not money. Bitcoin is a database. And databases are useful for storing all sorts of things. in the case of Bitcoin, it's very good at acting like a global abacus to show how many beads are on your side of the rail. And that's all it is. And so these people who are well-meaning for the most part are advising governments to do a very specific thing, which actually it could fail for them. You never know. I can tell you this, that if these governments make Bitcoin a strategic asset and then um, hoard all the Bitcoin, take Bitcoin out of circulation, this is not good for Bitcoin. It's not good for the price of Bitcoin. It's not good for the utility of Bitcoin. And so uh, it's a double-edged sword. It's a good thing that these people are sort of waking up to Bitcoin and not thinking that it's a threat or it's only for drug dealers or all kinds of other nonsense that they've been saying for years. But what it does mean is that they've got to, if they are allowed to run away with these mistaken ideas, these Wall Street ideas, there's going to be a problem. And it's interesting that a Wall Street type is coming to the government of India saying, you must do this. Now, wait a minute. India is a sovereign nation. They're perfectly capable of figuring out things for themselves. And so it's kind of bad taste for these people to say India must be doing this just because you've woken up to it all of a sudden. And 10 years ago, I wrote a piece about India and why it should be adopting Bitcoin. And so it's laughable that these newcomers are coming in and telling other people what to do when they've only just woken up to what Bitcoin is and are not even categorizing it properly. And so I think countries like the United States should lead by example. They have a written constitution, which is the envy of all sane people on earth, and they should apply their own laws to their treatment, the government treatment of Bitcoin, and lead by example. Don't get up and start telling people what to do when you can't even formulate a proper strategy or policy on Bitcoin, which in the case of America should be no policy at all because Bitcoin is speech and not money. And so you can't have any of your agencies telling people what they can do with their speech. This has already been to court more than once and proven that mathematics is speech. Bitcoin is mathematics. Therefore, you cannot come in and say you're not allowed to do this kind of speech in any way other than we tell you how to do it. And so I think America has a place to part. It has a part to play in leading the world into the Bitcoin global ecosystem, but they got to do it by example and not by diktat. They can't dictate to other countries how they should do things with Bitcoin. I'm very happy to hear that the Russian government has relented on trying to control people's doing math inside Russia. Russians are very good traditionally at mathematics, and so they should also, if they want to have a seat at the Bitcoin table, in as far as there even is one, they need to let the Russian people who are super smart, super creative, very good at maths and software to get on with it by themselves, allow the market to bear the risk of providing services to Bitcoin users who happen to be in Russia or in other places. And that's the most efficient way, most cost-effective way for governments to harness the power of Bitcoin. Don't try and be clever because you're not clever. You didn't come up with Bitcoin. It came from inside the normal population. It took you over 10 years to even start to understand what it is or why it works. And so you're not in the proper position in many respects to say what Bitcoin is and determine how it should be used by the people. You need to get out of the way, take a step back and let the public, let the market figure out what they should do with Bitcoin and how they should do it. And this idea, which is frankly deeply, deeply offensive to all real Americans, that the only way to interact with Bitcoin should be through exchanges and that regulation is required to control how people use Bitcoin, is extremely anti-American. If somebody were to say this about book publishers, we must only allow book publishers who have a license to publish books so that people don't publish books that are full of lies because we have to protect the people from lies. That's exactly what these people are saying. Bitcoin regulation or regulation of companies that use Bitcoin is a prerequisite to it being useful in the economy. That's absolutely false. There are more than enough laws on the books to protect people. Well, when I say protect, the laws don't actually protect people from things. What they do is offer you an avenue of recourse. There are many sufficient avenues of recourse to do with fraud that will cover anything any company or person wants to do with Bitcoin. There is no need for new laws that are tailored specifically for Bitcoin, and the American government in particular has no authority to regulate people publishing words and numbers in a database. And so whilst I'm very gratified that America is starting to wake up, they need to be very, very careful about bringing the wrong attitudes, thinking, and legal structures to something that doesn't require legal structure. And if they get this wrong, there are other countries that are getting it right. And it's a simple email and sending of a transaction somewhere to open up an incorporation in another jurisdiction, a freer jurisdiction, ironically, a more American jurisdiction than America, to escape the Luddite ideas of these people. And as for the national reserve, a Bitcoin national reserve, on the surface, it sounds like a good idea because you obviously don't want your quote unquote, your government to be exsanguinated and to be left out of the Bitcoin ecosystem as a laggard country when it comes to Bitcoin adoption. But how it's done is very, very, very important. You can't say, I need to buy a new car, and therefore I'm going to go steal the money to buy a new car. That's not how ethical business works. That's not how ethical transactions work. You can't steal money to buy a car. You can't steal money to make a national Bitcoin reserve. And I've written a piece about Cynthia Loomis's idea about having a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And so if America is going to do this, first of all, they need to fund it correctly. And they have to fund it, I think, through the tariff system that the greatest president ever, Donald John Trump, has proposed. If he removes the income tax from the yoke of the income tax from the necks of Americans and moves America to a Taft-style tariffs system, they can use that money, which should be paid in Bitcoin, to fund the strategic Bitcoin reserve of the United States. If it's true that during the Taft era, and of course it is, the American government had more money that it knew what to do with, the same effect will happen again, only they'll have more Bitcoin than they know what to do with. And so that's the way to build a Bitcoin national reserve, through the payment of tariffs. Mandate that all tariffs for all goods coming into the United States are paid in Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden you'll find that the American government has a huge coffer full of Bitcoin that they can then disperse into the economy as they do, which is normally inefficient, but with Musk in charge, maybe it's going to be efficient too. So we're going to get many different positive aspects, but this has to be done correctly from the start, not incorrectly. And the idea that this strategic reserve should be an arbitrary number, 1 million Bitcoin, 1/21st of all the Bitcoin is ever going to exist, and then locked away for decades so that nobody can even use it, that doesn't make any sense at all. It makes far more sense that tariffs are used to build this system, and then through that, American business and genius can be put into how this Bitcoin is being managed, how it's going to be managed by the state and everywhere else. If these tools to manage this great hoard of Bitcoin are made open source and available to everybody because they're developed by the government, the whole ecosystem is going to benefit. That's how it should be done. And it's not like I'm making up something new. You can paste and copy and paste all of these things from what's happened in the last, since Taft till now, including the software era, to figure out that that's the correct way it should be done. And so we have to be very careful. Well, I suggest people are very careful about how they proceed with this emerging Bitcoin ecosystem, how it's thought about, the rules that are used, which in America's case should be none, on how this should be mediated and controlled. The free market is the most powerful, potent way of getting things done and getting things done properly. And anything that interferes with that is going to cause a big problem. And America doesn't want any more problems. Just come out of a very long, dark era where the regulationistas and those quasi-socialists have made collecting rain off of your own roof illegal in some states in America, where raw milk that's unpasteurized has been made illegal, which got all the Amish out to vote for Trump, by the way. So it's very important. Don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Don't make assumptions that regulation is the way to keep people safe. Some very clever people say that AI has to be regulated to keep people safe. This is completely wrong. And if we go down this Ludistic, European-style socialist thinking when it comes to Bitcoin, it's going to end very badly for America. And nobody who's an American wants things to end badly for America. We want things to end correctly, or to carry on correctly for Americans. We want America to be the number one, the premier country on earth for Bitcoin. And it can do it. Americans have the know-how. They've had the know-how since the birth of the computer era and the internet era. And so all that has to happen is that has to be harnessed. People have to be left to their own devices to get things done properly, follow the rules as far as defrauding people are concerned, let the law do its job of protecting people for fraud after it's taken place, and then you watch, the market will do its magic by itself. You can't conjure prosperity at the table of the legislatures and their poison pens. It doesn't work like that. Markets don't work like that. And that applies directly to Bitcoin. If you want Bitcoin to become the global new money that's used on the internet, with America having a strategic central position in everything to do with mediating Bitcoin, the state must not be involved in it. The government was not involved in building of the web and the standards that were built to mediate websites, email, you name it. Those were all done privately, and the same thing can happen to Bitcoin. There's an I think it's IEF, I can't remember what it is. The people who do the standards for the web, and there is a payment part of that standard which was never implemented because Bitcoin didn't exist. Now that it does exist, it's obvious that it should be added to the other protocols on the internet without government interference. It's the people who write the software who should set the standards of how everything works. That's how the Bitcoin ecosystem has grown to its size today. Software developers have taken the lead and responsibility for making things work properly, and they've managed to stave off some very, very serious attacks from people whose names you know that I don't have to repeat. And so not only is the software working very, very well, it's able to withstand attacks of many different kinds and shades and flavors. And it's about to step into a new phase of global adoption. And thanks to Olo Alua Osuntoku and Elizabeth Stark and people like that, we have Lightning, upon which billions and billions of transactions can be made. And so this is not the time now for the Luddites and laggards to come in and say, no, you should actually be doing it this way. You should be thinking about it this way. No, if you want to contribute to Bitcoin, you either start a business or get your laptop, open up a command line and start writing software. You cannot dictate to people how they do their speech in computers. That's the law. If you don't like that, you can go and live in some other country where they don't have a written constitution and guaranteed rights. And if you think that you can force people in America to follow your rules and categorizations of Bitcoin, we can go to the Supreme Court and we will make the same arguments that Bernstein made and others, and we will have your rules shot down and incinerated. And you will deserve it because you're going against the American culture, the laws of the United States, and we're not going to tolerate it. It's as simple as that. We're not going back, as the Democrats say.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Man, I'm going to continue this conversation. We're just going to continue talking with Beauty on today's episode just because he's full of knowledge, so many good takes. But guys, we do have to pay the bills at the end of the day. So quick commercial break, guys. Bitcoin would not be possible without our sponsors. So I do want to give a shout out to our lead sponsor, Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. It's a publicly traded company coming out of Canada that recently expanded to all 50 US states. What makes Bitcoin Well different is that it's automatic self-custody. What does that mean? That means that when you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, as soon as the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. It doesn't even allow you to leave your Bitcoin on the exchange, which perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state, because after all, self-custody is the revolution. Also, they just announced a new product called Bitcoin Well Infinite. You can personally send me an email at nico@bitcoinwell.com. I will get you connected with a Bitcoin Well Infinite representative, and this is a tailored white glove experience for people who are looking to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more. So if you're tired of Coinbase or you're tired of these kind of UIs that it's just all computers and you want to deal with a human to buy your Bitcoin, whether that's buy, sell, or take self-custody, Bitcoin Well Infinite is for you. You could personally email me at nico@bitcoinwell.com to get started. Also, every time you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn something called Bitcoin Well points, and you can use those points towards the Bitcoin Wishing Well contest. So essentially, the way that it works is every time, like I said, every time you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn Bitcoin Well points, and you throw a coin into the Bitcoin Wishing Well, bada bing, bada boom, and you have an opportunity to win up to 1 million Satoshis. So today, first person that's scanned the QR code has won 2,100 sats. If you use promo code SimplyBTC, again, SimplyBTC, to sign up to BitcoinWell.com today, you get 3 tosses into the Bitcoin Wishing Well absolutely free. Get started. Go to BitcoinWell.com now. All right, everybody, let's get to the numbers. Lots to talk about. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? Stampseed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on Stampseed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. Head over to stampseed.com today. All right, everybody, I just want you to picture this 20 years from now, you know, or when you're 80 and your grandchildren are like, Grandpapa, could you give me your Bitcoin? And then you have to look at them in the face and you're gonna be like, no, I'm sorry, I lost it because I wrote down my seed words on a piece of paper. And they're gonna look at you and they're gonna say, Grandpapa, why didn't you get a stamp seed? And you're gonna say, oh, because I didn't do it. Don't put yourself in that situation. Use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off. Head over to stampseed.com today. Anyways, we're gonna change format a little bit today. I just want to take advantage of Beautyon here because he's been dropping the fire and we're just gonna continue the conversation. Before that, we do have to give a Satoshi the Bitcoin chicken celebration, because the price of Bitcoin did make an all-time high earlier on today. I believe we hit $94,700. So that's absolutely massive. But anyways, I do want to pivot the conversation back. Beautyon, that was amazing. Like always, you come on the show, blow my mind, blow everyone's minds, and I want to kind of continue this. And where I want to take it off from is this idea of getting back to America's original ideals. I think America has been Frankensteined since the establishment of the Federal Reserve. And coincidentally, I don't think this is a coincidence. Oh, someone said 94,900 was all-time high. Thank you for the correction. But America has been Frankenstein since the establishment of the Federal Reserve, 1913, which coincidentally was the same year that the income tax was established. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. And the way that they pitched the American people on the idea of an income tax is that it would only be for the ultra wealthy. So it was only 1 to 5% in the very beginning. Fast forward to World War II, FDR put it all the way up to 90%. You know, and it's been there ever since. And people essentially have been normalized to this idea that somehow you have to pay, you know, almost half, depending on where you live, almost half of your income to the state in order for the state to run effectively. I disagree. Why do I disagree? I live in the state of Florida, right? And I'm telling you, the state of Florida has a much better quality of life than the state of California or the state of New York. If you try to start a business, again, the state of Florida, much better. Guess what? The state of Florida has no income tax. And you tell me, like, wait, how is that possible? How could you say, how is that possible? Because if you leave more money in people's pockets rather than a group of bureaucrats, and those people have the ability to decide what to do with their money, I think you're going to get a better outcome. And I think what people also have to understand too is that it's not the government that's giving you these things. The government does not produce anything. The government takes. It is entrepreneurs that are driving society, entrepreneurs putting their own money on the line, taking risks, that are developing these incredible products that you use on a daily basis. Elon Musk landing a rocket is an entrepreneur, right? Elon Musk basically inventing a self-driving car is an entrepreneur. Simply Bitcoin making, you know, a daily live show, and we're entrepreneurs in a way. Beautyon creating Azteco, he's an entrepreneur in a way. Entrepreneurs are the ones that are developing products and really moving humanity forward. It is not governments. I would say governments move humanity back. You can make a very strong argument for that. So I know it's a little bit outside of the Overton window, this concept of getting rid of the income tax altogether. The knee-jerk response is, how will the roads be built? Well, how were the roads built before the introduction of the income tax in 1913? How the roads built here in Florida? I'll tell you what, the roads here in Florida are much better than the roads in California. But wait, there's no income tax. What's going on, right?
Never mind. Sorry, I have to interrupt you. How was the West won? How was California, quote unquote, colonized by the people from the East? There was no income tax that they were using to get people to go in caravans and the gold rush and everything else. I mean, come on. The idea that the income tax is a requirement for a civilized society is completely false. It's proven to be false if you know anything about history. The Federal Reserve System was created in a conspiracy at a meeting in a place called Jekyll Island. You read a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And before that, America had a previous central bank that was killed by, I believe it was Andrew Jackson. And so this is the second central bank of the United States. And so there is no reason. Prosperity of a nation does not come from taxation. This is a very well-known fact amongst the Bitcoiners, many Bitcoiners, but it's not generally known by the population. And really, in a free country, it shouldn't be a requirement that everybody knows the minutiae of how an economy works and why it doesn't. If the country is formed and governed correctly, the market will mediate everything and everyone will benefit, whether you know about how things work in the details or not. And so what has to happen in the case of Bitcoin is that Bitcoin has to be spread to every single person on Earth. You don't have to know how the gears underneath the hood of Bitcoin work. What you need to be able to do is get access to it in a trivial manner and to be able to use it. It's very important that this is understood by people who are trying to advocate for Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if some ex-famous person or some other person or some big company has a hoard of Bitcoin. That doesn't matter. What matters is that it's easily accessible to the greatest number of people. That's how the economic effect of Bitcoin is going to change everything. Not that some person has a lot of Bitcoin. Obviously, these stories are spectacular and very interesting, exciting, because it shows that there are a couple of people who are very dedicated to what they believe is the idea of Bitcoin. But that's not going to change the way things work. If every single Bitcoin was owned by one person and that Bitcoin was never in circulation, the power of Bitcoin would be completely neutralized, because money only has utility when it's in motion, not when it's all sitting in one person's account, not being used by anybody. In a situation like that, which is obviously completely theoretical, you'd have to have another Bitcoin released so that it could act like money and be in circulation amongst many people. And so whilst there's nothing wrong with collecting and essentially hoarding money, if anybody wants Bitcoin to take over the world, for the reasons why it was written, it needs to be widely distributed in a very flat manner amongst many, many people, used by many people. The super hoarding of Bitcoin isn't actually useful to the utility of Bitcoin. Although hoarding Bitcoin does give the utility of Bitcoin to the people who are hoarding it, anybody who's for Bitcoin, the mission of Bitcoin, which is essentially unwritten, then they have to be for spreading Bitcoin. They don't just hoard it. That's not rational. It's actually irrational. And it's a kind of OCD response to Bitcoin that I find rather odd, as they say.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think again, this is like against the grain type of thinking. If we want Bitcoin to be a medium of exchange, if we do want it to be a currency, you're gonna have to use it. I personally, when I go to El Salvador, or I was, lucky enough to go to Canada, and a buddy of mine, you guys know him by the name of BTC Sessions. He was doing these sat markets, and it was essentially like a Bitcoin circular economy. And what I would do is, whether I go to El Salvador, whether I go to Canada, I would load up, $500 or $600 on a Lightning wallet, and I would make sure to go through every single one of those vendors and pay them in Bitcoin, using Bitcoin as money. And I'm telling you, guys, like, Lightning has come a long way, and it's a pleasurable experience. It's not quite Apple Pay, and it needs to be, but it's getting close with the QR code and whatever. I hope they add haptic feedback. I hope they add the little touch. I mean, there's no reason as to why those things couldn't be possible. And it was you, Beautyon, that told me. You said, like, Nico, like, we need to make Bitcoin human friendly. And right now it's not. Right now it's designed for a bunch of tech nerds on the internet. Sorry guys, but that's the reality. We need to make,
being a tech nerd myself, more or less so interested. I'm not insulted. It's just a matter of fact.
I'm talking about myself and Opti too, right?
Self-deprecating humor is good. But the other thing that's very, very important to try to understand is that when we're talking about the tools that people use to move Bitcoin from A to B, we're not talking about Bitcoin. We're talking about companies that have written wallets to use Bitcoin. And it's those people who have to be very careful about how they're doing what they're doing. Now, there are some wallets out there. When you want to redeem an Azteco voucher, it's required that you press send instead of receive. Now, that user experience is something that we cannot show to anybody because it's so upside down, so counterintuitive, so completely wrong that we can't possibly expose this to other people, because they'll say, well, how I'm receiving Bitcoin, why am I pressing send to receive? And so before we even start to explain anything, we just say, no, we're not going to do that. Whereas if we use something like Wallet of Satoshi, then you have an experience which is very, very close to being an ideal consumer Bitcoin experience. And by the way, the phrase consumer Bitcoin, which we coined in Azteco, this is what has to be the norm if you want Bitcoin to spread everywhere. You have to have the proper user experience and graphic design that any user is going to be familiar with. That's why when Apple or Google gets onto Bitcoin, they're going to put their years of interaction understanding onto making the perfect wallet. And then all the problems of using a wallet are going to go away. It'll be like ducks to water, people using Bitcoin, and then that won't be the problem anymore, and there'll be something else to focus on. But we can see that there is a locus somewhere, a design and user experience locus that is being centered on. And there's two examples of companies that are getting close to this. The first one is Primal. Now, Primal is a Nostr client, and they have a Bitcoin wallet element to Primal, which is absolutely wonderful. You've got to try it. It's almost perfect. The other company is BitKey. BitKey's interface, if you were to put it next to Primal's, you would see that it's very, very similar. That's not because one of them has copied the other one, although that might have happened, but it doesn't really matter. I have a suspicion that they've both arrived at the same conclusions from two totally different directions. And what this tells me is that these wallets have the look of the Bitcoin wallets of the future, where they're super legible, super easy to use. There are no options littered all over the screen. All of the conventions to do with sending messages and receiving messages are duplicated in these wallets so that you don't have to learn anything, read anything, or understand anything just to use them. And so this has to be the understanding that Bitcoin itself is not a company. Bitcoin itself can't do anything. It's companies. And behind those companies are people. And those people need to be appealed to directly to say, you guys have got to clean up your act. You've got to stop presenting things to the user that they A, have no interest in, and B, are never going to use. That's why Wallet of Satoshi is so powerful. And of course, there's a this sort of theme going around in the Bitcoin community that Wallet of Satoshi is no good because it's not custodial, blah, blah, all this kind of nonsense. What these people are doing is preparing for the onslaught, the flood, the tidal wave of Bitcoin users. And when that tidal wave of Bitcoin users comes, I can guarantee you that if the conventions of sending and receiving were reversed, their support groups would be inundated with complaints and questions and all kinds of other stuff. If when your support groups are empty, your support, your Zendesk are all empty, and yet the number of transactions is going up, is an indication that you're doing things correctly. You and I know that Wallet of Satoshi works exactly as described. The billions of people who are coming to Bitcoin are not going to be running their own nodes. They're not going to be controlling their own infrastructure. They're going to be using Bitcoin in the same way that they use WhatsApp and Signal. And so for Bitcoin to be useful to these people, it has to be brought to them in that kind of interface. What happens behind the scenes is less important than these people having access to Bitcoin. Now, there are some people who will argue that you're not using Bitcoin unless you're running your own node. That is correct and incorrect at the same time. If you go to a noodle bar in Da Nang and you're going to buy a bowl of noodles with Bitcoin and you use Satoshi to buy those noodles, you've used Bitcoin. There's no doubt about that. And so what matters is the utility, where you can use it, how you can be onboarded to Bitcoin, how you can get a wallet like that and then top it up with Bitcoin like that. Those are the things that matter if you want to see Bitcoin fulfill its full potential. The idea that everybody has to use Bitcoin in only one way is as absurd as categorizing Bitcoin as a digital asset or a strategic reserve or any single thing. It's very important that the market is what determines what Bitcoin is and what the best way to use it is. It doesn't come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. And the people who understand this first are going to be the ones to change the world. And I think that's a very, very good thing. It's a perfectly natural thing, and it's enough to make Bitcoin get into the hands of everybody who needs to use it.
Beautiful, beautiful. I completely agree. Beautyon dropping the hot fire. Guys, we're going to continue this conversation. I do want to get Beautyon's take on Howard Lutnick being appointed. Let me make sure I get this correctly. Being appointed the Secretary of Commerce. Guys, we'll be right back. We're going to hit the news. Let's do this.
A special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your piece of Bitcoin.
All right, everybody, this is Opti. And Opti has a Passport by Foundation devices. It's incredibly easy to use. It's intuitive. This is the perfect gift to give to someone that perhaps is a little bit intimidated by self-custody. It doesn't sacrifice security for convenience. You can pair it up with the Envoy app. It's incredibly easy to use. Guys, get yourself a Passport by Foundation devices. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin. It doesn't come with Opti, but if you use promo code SIMPLY, you will get a discount. All right, let's get to today's news. Here we go. So Howard Lutnick, I can't wait to get Beautyon's take on this. Howard Lutnick was just appointed the Secretary of Commerce by President Donald Trump. Now, the reason, and we'll give a little bit of context. So Howard has been a dynamic force on Wall Street for more than 30 years. He joined Counter Fitzgerald in 1983 and rapidly rose through the ranks to become president and CEO at the age of 29. Tragedy struck on September 11, 2001, when terrorists attacked the World Trade Center and Counter Fitzgerald lost 658 of its 960 New York-based employees, including Howard's brother and his best friend. He emerged from those events with an indomitable sense of purpose to rebuild the firm, to honor those lost, support their families, and become a beacon of hope for those who remained. He was an inspiration to the world, the embodiment of resilience in the face of unspeakable tragedy. There's a little bit about, Howard, and this, by the way, is coming from the presidential nominee who's going to be sworn into office January 20th, Donald J. Trump. Anyways, here are some things, because this is a Bitcoin show after all, and you're like, Nico, what are we talking about? These are some of the things that he has said recently about Bitcoin. Let's check it out.
Gerald is here to announce that we are launching a Bitcoin financing business. We will offer leverage to those who own Bitcoin. We are going to launch with $2 billion of lending. And once we put out the $2 billion of lending, we will go up in increments of $2 billion. You have to realize Cantor and BGC, its largest wholesaler, we finance and arrange vast amounts. And we are going to now build that ecosystem for Bitcoin. So the moral of the story is we are going to welcome Bitcoin into the financing family of the global financial markets, and Cantor Fitzgerald's going to be your sponsor. We will build the best platform for financing Bitcoin. We will work with the best custodians. We are committed to your ecosystem of Bitcoin. So, in closing, we are Cantor Fitzgerald, and we will support Bitcoin. Thank you, everybody.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that guy was just nominated by Trump, Howard Lutnick, to be part of Trump's cabinet. Those are the things that he was saying about Bitcoin. And here's a recent clip of him on the Anthony Pompliano podcast.
Out either you or Cantor.
I don't have a big enough percentage. I probably have, I can't say because then people can figure out that no, how much I have. I would say I have hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay.
Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars exposure to Bitcoin. And it will be billions.
I was going to say, so next year when you come back and we'll do this again and you'll be a Bitcoin billionaire and,
yeah, but you remember that model I told you? So if every time Bitcoin dips, I'm going to be the buyer. Right?
Trust me, I know why you're doing the lending.
It's all coming. You figured it out.
Listen, you don't have to explain that one around here.
So I got the 50% Bitcoin, I got the Bitcoin lending, but basically what you're going to see is Cantor Fitzgerald is going to be the sponsor of Bitcoin into traditional finance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will be the leader of it. And I'll pull out this podcast in years to come and say, see, I told you, because no one's going to remember.
Of course.
Right. But all the banks, after we do it and show people how to do it right, they'll all copy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the asset of Bitcoin will just, as it becomes more accepted, it will become more valuable. And the whole Bitcoin nation should just call it a commodity, never a currency.
Mm-hmm.
Just call.
Oof, I'm going to stop it right there.
That's it. You triggered me now, and so well done.
I'm going to stop it right there.
So invoices in the mail. These guys are absolutely don't interrupt me. These guys are absolutely out of order. They're completely outrageous. Now, of course, it's very good that this gentleman has been invited into the Trump cabinet. This is a very good thing because he's not an ignoramus. He's not frightened of Bitcoin. And he's probably going to do more good than harm, I imagine. That's going to be a very good thing. But the idea that one company and one man can tell you how to do Bitcoin right is completely absurd. Bitcoin is not a single thing. Bitcoin is a database. It's not an asset. And so the fact that this man wants to call Bitcoin one thing and he says he's going to show everybody how to do it right, this is completely absurd. There are many developers, software developers all over the world who are going to be using Bitcoin in the ways that they want, including, believe it or not, things that are I consider to be anti-Bitcoin, which is putting images onto the chain of blocks. And so is Bitcoin a database to store images on, or is it a exclusive reserve of Cantor to define what it is? This is an interesting question because Bitcoin is essentially a database. Nobody controls it. Anybody anywhere on earth can write to that database whatever they can afford to put on it. And so to make a definitive statement like this, I personally think is very worrying because Either you're going to be proven right and you're going to ring fence off Bitcoin so that only companies who think like this gentleman thinks are going to be able to use it legally, or they're going to be wrong and they're going to lose money, which of course is completely their business. I don't think they are going to lose money, but that's it's just the principle that counts. And so the idea that Cantor is going to be building on Bitcoin, it's like just imagine this was the age of the first computers, the first computers that came from IBM, those mainframes. It's like saying that we are going to be the people who are going to bring computers to everyone. No, it's not. It's not like that. You're going to be using computers for your business purpose. They're going to be using Bitcoin for their business purpose. And that has nothing to do with anybody else and what they want to use Bitcoin for. These people cannot define Bitcoin. They cannot sequester it off and tell people what Bitcoin is. It doesn't work like that. Reality doesn't work like that. And I think part of the problem that America has faced in being such a laggard in getting into Bitcoin is that they need to have things defined for them before they will understand, or before they'll even try to understand anything. And because Bitcoin is essentially a purely technical arrangement of software, these people who do not program, who do not build their own computers, who don't run anything, they are left like leaves in the wind trying to quote unquote figure out what Bitcoin is all about. And of course they can't do that because they have no insight, they have no inroad into understanding what Bitcoin is. It's only now that analogies have been put in front of them that they can understand, that are tangential to their previous businesses, that they can say, Bitcoin is digital gold. Gold we understand, digital we understand. Put the two things together, digital gold we understand. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense on stilts. So Bitcoin is not digital gold. It's just a database. And so the final part of the notes I wrote down when I was watching these very triggering the quotes, Bitcoin, these people are hoarding Bitcoin for themselves. They hold Bitcoin so that in the anticipation that the value of Bitcoin is going to go up. Now, if you are spending your time doing these two things that are contradictory, first of all, hoarding Bitcoin in the hopes that it goes up, and then on the other hand, ring fencing Bitcoin so that only registered people can use it, or it can only be used for one purpose in the United States. These two things are contradictory. If you want Bitcoin to become maximally valuable, you want as many people using it in as many different contexts as possible, in the same way that people use electricity in many different contexts. You don't have an electricity regulator saying you can't use electricity to light this kind of light bulb, or you run that kind of refrigerator. Once electricity is connected to your house, what you do with electricity in your own house is your own business. And so what these people are doing is they're trying to say that electricity is one thing. We decide what electricity is. We decide what proper use of electricity is, and nobody else is allowed to say so. Obviously, that's completely ridiculous. And so if these people really expect Bitcoin to become 10, 20, 30, 100, 1,000 times worth more than it is today, they need to let the market disseminate Bitcoin into every single corner of the world, into every device, so that when you get on an elevator to go up in an elevator, you have to pay you have to pay like a fraction of a Bitcoin to go up and down an elevator. Really, that sounds completely insane. But this is the kind of thing that can happen when Bitcoin is allowed to creep into every single area of human activity. It's going to be used in ways that people can't even imagine today. And I can tell you, the people who are calling Bitcoin an asset couldn't imagine Bitcoin before it was written. They don't know why Bitcoin was written. I guarantee you today that these people do not hold that the Federal Reserve is illegitimate on its face. They all believe in the fiat dollar. They all believe that the dollar is legitimate and the dollar must be carried on forever. If they really did understand why Bitcoin was written, they would have accepted it as soon as it was released. It's taken them so long because they believe in the fiat system. They accept the fiat system. They want the fiat system to continue. They measure their wealth in dollars, not in Bitcoin. They want to see the price of Bitcoin go up. Now, of course, everybody wants to see the price of Bitcoin go up because everybody's using fiat money. But if they really understood Bitcoin, they wouldn't care about the price of Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin doesn't matter. The utility of Bitcoin matters. That the more people using Bitcoin, then less is what matters, not the price of Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is the only sound money that can be transferred peer-to-peer on a telephone, a cell phone, and without any third-party involvement. So a lot of these people have a catching up to do. And I don't mind people having catching up to do. You can't be expected out of the box to understand everything to do with Bitcoin, which includes Austrian economics and those other arcane things. What I do object to is people getting in the way of those of us who do understand Bitcoin at least a little bit, and then telling us how we should define it, what rules we should follow to run our own software on our own machines, interacting non-violently and voluntarily with other people. And that's what I object to, and that's what every real American objects to, that the government can come in and tell you, you can't publish this kind of book, you can't release this kind of database, you can't use your speech in X, Y, or Z way without a license. That's what's the objectionable thing. They've got to take a deep breath, stand down, and let the market decide what the best way to mediate Bitcoin is. And it's very, very disturbing that the usual suspects are being hauled into the White House to help the greatest ever American administration think about Bitcoin. And let's just think about this just for a second. Just imagine that there was an evil villain in Bitcoin who was, through his thinking, anti-Bitcoin, pure anti-Bitcoin. And that was the person who was going in to advise the administration that KYC was completely necessary, that holding your own keys was against the national interest, and all that kind of thing. That, as the voice of Bitcoin, quote unquote, in the administration, would be a nightmare scenario. I'm not saying it's happening, but just imagine if it was to happen. Who would you prefer to have advising the new and best ever American administration about what Bitcoin is, what the best way to use it is, etc., etc.? You'd rather have someone, I don't know, someone like me there, and not somebody who is an anti-Bitcoin person. Also, you would not want somebody who believes that the environmental impact, quote unquote, of Bitcoin is too severe for it to be used. These people don't understand anything about electricity, how electricity works, or what it's generated and what it's used for mostly. And I'm sure all of your viewers know that the amount of electricity used to create aluminium, or in America, aluminum, aluminum is smelted using electricity. The amount of electricity used to do that is far greater than the amount of electricity used to mine Bitcoin. And so to complain about Bitcoin on the environmental basis is completely absurd. It doesn't take reality into account. And also the side effects, the second order effects of Bitcoin, sound money, being in the hands of billions of people, far outweighs any quote unquote environmental costs of running the miners. And so even if Bitcoin was run only on fossil fuels, which of course it isn't, it's run on many sustainable sources as well, but even if it was run only on burning diesel or coal, it'd be well worth it, because of the second order effects in introducing sound money to people where they save more than they spend would help to contribute to the death of the consumer society and all these other ills that plague the fiat system, the fiat mediated system, because fiat encourages spending, encourages wastefulness, whereas Bitcoin is the opposite. And so these equations can only be put together for people who, first of all, understand why Bitcoin was written, what the effect of fiat money is on the economy, and all those other things. It's only with these small pieces all put together that you can understand why it's important that, first of all, Bitcoin should not be regulated, why the environmental impact of Bitcoin is not only smaller than other uses, but is absolutely worth it in terms of the second order effects and many other things. And people don't talk about these things because they don't know about them. And those that do are not concerned about them enough to make them the talking point. They have other reasons why they want Bitcoin to be regulated. For the crony capitalists who have the ear of the president, Yipotus, the greatest ever president of the United States, these people have a reason for going there and advocating for KYC, AML, and all the other things because they know that the barriers to entry will be all of a sudden put up like a huge force field, and they will have free reign, and all the upstart entrants, market entrants, are not going to be able to get the licenses and everything else they need to do run a Bitcoin business. And so the world is a big place. There are many places in the world, many different free countries where Bitcoin businesses can establish an entity and serve the entire world. And if any particular country wants to go down the route of Luddism and crony capitalism, they are at liberty to do so. Bitcoiners and Bitcoin entrepreneurs are at liberty to go to other places. The EU is a perfect example, trying to outlaw unhosted wallets, which is not even a real thing, by the way. This is just a term, a portmanteau they've made up. They want to outlaw these wallets where the keys are not controlled by a central entity. Okay, fine. By all means, do that. All of you people in the EU will not be able to use a self-custodial wallet. That's perfectly fine. Other people will be able to use those wallets in the world, and there's 7 billion people on Earth, 300 million Europeans. Who do you think's going to win? I think the people outside the EU are going to win, and the people who serve them are also going to win. So by all means, you can put the Luddite hat on, ban custodial wallets, and do all this kind of business, and that's fine. But the world is going to teach you a lesson. You're going to be punished for it, and you're going to deserve it because you've been told in advance. Now, for those who are paying attention, it might seem contradictory that I'm for wallet of Satoshi and also taking the stance that custodial wallets are very important and shouldn't be outlawed. The overarching theme of this and principle is that the market should decide what is best when it comes to providing or the provision of service of Bitcoin to people, not an apparatchik, not from some non-programmer financial world escapee who thinks that they're going to superimpose their rules and thinking about Bitcoin on everybody else. The market must decide what the best way is to serve the public. And it doesn't matter what sector of the public it is. Mr. Lutnick and all these other people have a very, very deep understanding about what the financial community requires in terms of services and the provision of those services. And so he, with that expert knowledge, can put together a set of services and tools which is perfectly suited to those customers at constituency. And he should be at liberty to do that. On the other hand, the people who come from a completely different perspective, let's take the most polar opposite perspective that you can possibly have, the ordinals community. Those ordinals people should be able to do whatever it is they want, whether you like it or not, with the Bitcoin software that they've downloaded, that they're coding against, and that they're working with. And the two worlds don't ever have to meet, in the same way that people who go to the McDonald's website to order McDonald's don't go to the Burger King website. They're both on the web, but these two different constituencies, both dealing in burgers, never touch each other. And that's the proper way to think about Bitcoin. Everybody can use it for whatever they want. They all have to pay access to make transactions, and whatever they want to do with it is their business. It's not your business to tell people what they should do, call memes and so the ordinals an asset, and say that because it's an asset, you have to get a license to do this kind of stuff. This is very, very, very toxic, very anti-American, and I don't want America to lose in this competition to be the number one, the premier country to do with Bitcoin. So you have to be very, very careful. By all means, work with Bitcoin in whatever way you want, but don't get in the way of other people. Don't take one perspective of one man as your guide to what Bitcoin actually is. No, those people look at Bitcoin through their own lenses, and then they impose their own thinking on the services that they provide. That doesn't mean that what they think applies to anybody else. And if you don't understand this, you're going to lose. And once you lose the premier position in Bitcoin as the premier country for Bitcoin, it's going to be very, very hard to get it back. I can tell you there's one country that has suffered this very recently, and that's the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has suffered with companies leaving that country to go to freer jurisdictions, and nobody who is a Bitcoin entrepreneur is thinking about moving to Shoreditch in central London to start a Bitcoin company. It's the last place on earth that anybody would want to start a Bitcoin business. Why? Because they've taken the wrong advice about what Bitcoin is, saying it's a digital asset, saying it's a digital commodity, all this other portmanteau nonsense, which is irrational, illogical, and destructive of the Bitcoin business ecosystem. And so all sovereign nations are at liberty to take these bad steps, these missteps. There are many places other people can go, and they're going there. It's as simple as that. You know that there are many companies that are going to El Salvador to incorporate, and they're doing so because the laws there are sensible. In that they're very, very, very light touch. They're so light touch, it's like the touch of a feather as you drop it, and I mean a big one too. So if you want to attract entrepreneurs who are working in Bitcoin, the way to do it is through the free market. That's how you do it. And then maybe in 30 years, 40 years, if there's anybody left who has the regulation mindset, well, then you can think about it after you've captured the market for Bitcoin entrepreneurialism. But to try and do so beforehand, we need the rules of the road, what's kind of a claptrap. It's not going to work. It's not going to work because everybody understands in this age where you can communicate with anybody, set up an incorporation anywhere without even leaving your desk, you don't have to tolerate Luddism. You don't have to tolerate Cynthia Loomis. You don't have to tolerate the FCA in the UK. You don't have to tolerate the government of Russia telling you you're not allowed to run a Bitcoin business. None of it's going to work anymore. And the country that is sensible, the country that has the correct attitude to this is going to attract all of the money. And it's not going to go back because once you've been kicked out of a jurisdiction, the bitterness is always there. And I think there are very, very few inducements that can make companies move back to jurisdictions where they've been told to get lost because that taste is not good.
100 beautiful mic drop moment from Beautyon. 100%. And the term Luddite, guys, this is sovereign individual thesis, right? Yeah, Bitcoin gives you the power to not only vote with your wallet, but also your feet. You're going to flock to more favorable jurisdictions that actually want your business, right? And this isn't just a theory or anymore. We saw this with the reaction from certain states as they reacted to the pandemic. And you saw an exodus of people leaving California, leaving New York, and going to Texas and Florida, where there was more favorable business environment. So yes, it's like, you know, follow the laws in your jurisdiction. But if the laws are unjust, I'm as a Bitcoiner, I'm gonna get up and leave, and I'm gonna go to a jurisdiction that is more favorable. And with Bitcoin, it gives you the power to do that. You know, before Bitcoin, it was kind of difficult. You know, what were you gonna do? But now that you can take self-custody, you can theoretically memorize a 12-word to 24-word seed phrase. Like, that's a lot. You know, it empowers you as an individual, but only if you're going to use the tools. Anyways, guys, right. We're going to hit the culture, and we're going to talk about Azteco. We're going to talk about Beautyon's company and what he's doing. But before I do, give a shout out to some of our partners. So we're going to start off with first, HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's been battle tested through every possible market. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to redefine the future of sustainable computing. Gotta also casually drop in here that HIVE consistently tops the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. Learn more by following them at HIVE Digital Tech, or check them out at hivedigitaltech.com. Also, they're a publicly traded company, so you can check out their ticker on the NASDAQ, HIVE. All right, everybody. I also want to tell you about one of my favorite Bitcoin conferences. Of course, I am talking about the legendary BitBlockBoom. Guys, this is one of the best Bitcoin conferences in the space. You'll only find pure Bitcoin signal there. The speakers, the events, the side barbecue. It's absolutely awesome. It's going to be in Dallas, Texas this year, April 3rd, April 4th, April 5th, and April 6th. The whole Simply Bitcoin crew will be there. That includes Opti, that includes myself, that includes Rustin, that includes Dante, that includes Jacob, that includes Sophie. We're going to be doing the production for them. So we're going to be live streaming the entirety of the content. Guys, you don't want to miss one of the best Bitcoin conferences of the year, and I hope to see you guys in person so we can have a chat. Get your tickets to BitBlockBoom today before the price increases. Also, if you use promo code BBB21, you get $100 off your tickets. Guys, I hope to see you at BitBlockBoom 2025 in Dallas, Texas. All right, everybody, let's hit the culture. Everybody, I do also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Orange Pill app. Stack friends who stack sats. Join the 13,912 Bitcoiners that are currently on the app. The Orange Pill app is the Bitcoin social layer. So if you're traveling, you're on the go, and perhaps you don't know any Bitcoiners around you, or perhaps you don't know any Bitcoiners in your city, you pull up the Orange Pill app and it will show you geographically the Bitcoiners that are near you, and it will give you the capability of sending them a message directly. It also has a very clever filtration system, so you won't find scammers or spammers on the app. Also, it's the #1 resource for Bitcoin only events. So perhaps you're traveling, you're going to a conference, but you're staying at that location for a week and the conference is only 2 days. What are you going to do the days that there's no events? Pull up the Orange Pill app and you'll see there's Bitcoin events near you. So to get started, scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. Download the Orange Pill app today. Stack friends who stack sats. All right, everybody, let's open up this conversation and let's talk about Azteco. Azteco is Beautyon's baby. He has been working on this. This is his project, and this is one of the best ways, by the way, for people to acquire Bitcoin that may not have access to traditional banking services. So they're available in the United States and they're available worldwide as well. So, and I know, Akin, we were talking, you guys recently announced a new product, something that you guys are releasing. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a new product, but we have a couple of new integrations, which are very interesting. If you have a BitKey, you can redeem an Azteco voucher directly into it, which is very, very seamless and user-friendly. And we also have an integration with Foundation devices. And I know that the Foundation doesn't come with Opti, but it does come with Azteco. So you can redeem one of our vouchers into your Foundation device. And this is very important because the connection between you and the Bitcoin that you've bought and the Bitcoin that you have stored either on your BitKey or in your Foundation device is broken, so that you can have Bitcoin privately, just as you have other things privately, like having a private SIM card or having an account on Signal where you can communicate in private with other people. And remember, Bitcoin is a communication network. It is not money. It is exactly the same in function as Signal or WhatsApp or any of these other tools. And the expectation of privacy and sending messages on Bitcoin should be exactly the same as it is anywhere else. And if you think about it, if Bitcoin is a messaging service, the only thing that you can send on Bitcoin is numbers, basically the numbers 0 to 9. And the idea that you should be registered to be able to send numbers, which are multiples of prime numbers, before you can do this is completely absurd. And so if you start thinking about Bitcoin from the correct starting for the correct initial premise, then what we're doing at Azteco makes perfect sense. All you need to do is go into a local store that sells lottery tickets. For example, if you're in Brazil, you can go into a lotteria after going onto our app and ordering a voucher, pay for the voucher, and then about 3 seconds later, it will arrive in your inbox, and then you can redeem it. There are other places where you can go and pay in person and have the voucher printed out for you on the spot. And we're rolling this out to many different countries. We're available essentially worldwide now through our website. Go through a simple process of finding an outlet, and then in a very short order, you can find yourself with an Azteco voucher that you can then redeem to any Bitcoin address. And Azteco doesn't track your use of Bitcoin. We don't have users, we don't have accounts. We only sell Bitcoin vouchers, which are redeemable for Bitcoin. And so it's very, very useful for people who want to not only have all the advantages of Bitcoin, controlling your own money over the internet, but to also do so in a private way, which is the right of everybody, certainly the right of every American, and this has already been tested. So we've made it easy to get Bitcoin. It is the easiest way for anybody to buy Bitcoin. We've worked very hard to remove everything from the process of buying Bitcoin that can be removed. If we were to remove any part of Azteco in terms of the process of buying a voucher, it would not work. There's nothing more than we can remove to make buying Bitcoin more easy. And we're talking about not buying hundreds of thousands of dollars of Bitcoin. We're talking about small amounts of Bitcoin. Believe it or not, the vast number of people on Earth, who number in the billions, don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars each that they can put into their hardware wallet and then hodl for years and years. They are on small wages, small salaries, and they have a use for money in the same way that other people have a use for money. There are 2 billion people, just for example, 2 billion people on Earth who don't have bank accounts. So these people, the only means that they have of saving money is through something like Bitcoin on a smartphone, which they also have. And if they use a smartphone and a Bitcoin wallet, they can start to store money for themselves, use it over time, bequeath it, and do all the other things that Westerners take for granted that are not available to them simply because they don't have a bank account. And that also means, by the way, that the result of not having a bank account, the consequence of not having a bank account, means that they can't engage in e-commerce online. They can't roll up to Amazon and buy something with their credit card because they don't have credit cards. Now, Amazon doesn't take Bitcoin yet, but when Amazon does take Bitcoin, and I assure you that they're going to be able to pay with Bitcoin for all the goods that are available on Amazon. And because Bitcoin eliminates payer fraud, all the problems of credit cards will be eliminated in one fell swoop. This is a revolution in how people use money online. The elimination of payer fraud alone, which is absolutely staggeringly huge, should be enough of an incentive for all the companies who are selling things online to look very, very closely at Bitcoin. As soon as you receive a Bitcoin transaction, that money, quote unquote, is yours. It cannot be taken from you. It cannot be manipulated. It can't be changed. And so this is a very, very powerful new payment rail. And if you think about it from that perspective, this is an absolutely tremendous revolution in how things are done. And so Mr. Lutnick and his idea about Wall Street and everything else is actually running in parallel to Bitcoin for the masses, Bitcoin for the unbanked, Bitcoin for the peasants, for want of a better description. And the two things are not mutually exclusive, they're complementary. This is why it's very important for the Lutnicks and all of these people who think that KYC is a prerequisite to using Bitcoin. This is why they're completely dead wrong. and this is why they're also wrong, hoarding Bitcoin, expecting for its value to go up, but saying that a class of people who don't happen to live in America should be excluded from using Bitcoin. They're absolutely wrong about that. There's no reason why technically people cannot use Bitcoin for smaller amounts of money and use it in contexts that are completely excluded from them for no good reason. There is no technical reason now why e-commerce cannot be a global phenomenon available to everybody at the same time, with the extra icing on the cake of the elimination of payer fraud. This opens up a new era in e-commerce, where previously, if you had a credit card from India or some country that wasn't the United States, using that card on an American website, apparently the numbers are 60% of the transactions get declined because you're not living in the right country. But with Bitcoin, that goes away, because as long as the confirmation is that the Bitcoin transaction is confirmed, the recipient knows they've received this money irrevocably. And that means that they can ship out the goods on that basis with complete confidence that there's no payment fraud or no possibility of chargebacks because of fraud. It's a push payment system. And so if we start thinking about Bitcoin in this manner and not a one-dimensional, America-centric, what's the correct word, a tunnel-visioned manner, then all of a sudden the entire world opens up to this new opportunity for Bitcoin to be used as the fundamental unit of commerce online. It's
beautiful.
It's such a huge opportunity. It's such a staggering opportunity. I think many of the people who are mischaracterizing Bitcoin, saying it is an asset like a bunch of robots, I think these people, a lot of them don't have passports. I think they have no idea how other people, the vast majority, by the way, the vast majority of human beings live. And if they had even an inkling of this, they would be on this narrative of Bitcoin like white on rice, because there's so much money to be made by serving these people with simple access to Bitcoin. And
100%.
Azteco does. Azteco serves Bitcoin in the most simple possible way to the people who need it.
100%. And Akin, let me ask you something. So, because the people might not be familiar with it, these vouchers, let's start with the United States and we'll move on to the other countries. Opti, if you could pull up the countries that are available, that'd be really helpful. So in the United States, let's say you want to purchase an Azteco voucher, where can you find these?
If you click on an online store, you can get a Driffle, Iniba, G2A, Kingwin, Off Gamers, Sysend, and any one of these places, and you can pay with your credit card.
And you can find these in retail places as well. Is that correct?
This is what's coming next in maybe Q2 of 2025. The retail, to be able to go into CVS, for example, and buy.
That's incredible.
Over the counter. Now, it's been very, very difficult to get this done, because all of our good friends who are running big businesses will listen to the proclamations of a Lutnick and of many other people and say, it's an asset, it's a this, it's a that. And they say, well, we don't deal in assets. We don't we sell aspirin. And so it's very, very difficult for us to disabuse these people of the brainwashing that's been dumped into their heads by these Wall Street people who are looking through Bitcoin through a cardboard tube that's like a 1 inch across. They only see Bitcoin. Well, let's think about it this way. They're looking at the part of the elephant with a magnifying glass. It's only one part of the elephant, whereas the elephant's a very, very big thing, has many different parts, has 4 feet, a tail, a trunk, the tusks and everything else, the big ears. If you're looking only at the tuft at the end of the tail, you'll say, well, Bitcoin is a tufty hair thing. It's only like this big. It's black, and that's it. And it's not, that's what we need. We need a comb for that. We don't need anything else other than a comb to comb out these hairs. Well, no, an elephant has many different parts. You have to take a step back, put the magnifying glass down, stop looking at the elephant through the wrong side of the telescope, and see it's a very, very big, magnificent monster thing, and it's there's a lot of elements to an elephant, other than it's the tiny little end of its tail. And that's what's going to happen in Bitcoin. It's going to happen as a surprise also, because when we talk to businesses about what Bitcoin is, when we show them Azteco in the context of gift cards and everything else they already sell, they understand what we're talking about because they're already in that business. And so it's much easier for us to convince them that this is correct. Now, there is no avenue for us or opportunity for us to explain what Bitcoin actually is to people who are not involved in business. And so they, because nobody's challenging them, they persist in this mischaracterization of Bitcoin, and it's very, very annoying. But what's going to happen is that all of a sudden, there are going to be many, many people using Azteco. And in about 8 days' time, we're doing integration that will bring us in front of about 100 million people. And that's all I'm allowed to say about that.
Oof.
But when that happens, all of a sudden, using Bitcoin through Azteco is going to be the norm.
I love that.
Using Bitcoin through exchanges is going to be the reserve of the Lutnicks and all of the finance people who are buying $1 million worth of Bitcoin at once, which of course an exchange is very good for that. Exchange is very good for buying lots of Bitcoin. But the normal people, the ordinary people, are going to be using Bitcoin through Azteco. And you've seen that picture from the movie with that the actor. He's on the beach with that old Motorola phone, and his name is Sheen. I think it's Martin. Is it Martin Sheen? I can't remember who it is, but it's a big Motorola brick phone. And back when these brick phones were the only mobile phones around, the idea that even school children would be having mobile phones was completely absurd. And that's what we're in today. We're in the huge Motorola brick phone era of Bitcoin, where these Wall Street types think that mobile phones are a big brick that you have to keep in your briefcase. And when you take it out, you get your secretary to dial it because you don't want to dial a phone. Now, when this new era of Bitcoin comes in, the consumer Bitcoin era, everybody will be using Bitcoin. Everybody will have it on their mobile phone. People will be using it to spend small amounts of money, to send small amounts of money, and to save small amounts of money. To save, send, and spend. That's what Azteco is about. We're going to make it possible by making access to Bitcoin trivially easy. And if you're an American, of course, you have a right to access to Bitcoin because there's such a thing called the First Amendment. And the First Amendment, as far as it touches software, has been explored in several court cases, all of which overlap identically with Bitcoin. And my suggestion is that Bitcoin businesses in America are not forced to go to court to prove this because it's a waste of everybody's time. If the overbearing state is to be drawn down and to be whittled away and hacked away, you can't have the regulation lust and a small government at the same time. It's got to be small for everybody. It's got to be shrunk for everybody at the same time. And so rationality has to be brought to the table. If not, then the Bitcoin ecosystem will be centered on another country where people are rational, where people are sensible, and high-speed, reliable internet is available everywhere. And those are the new banking rails. Everywhere that high-speed, reliable internet is available and you have a sane government, you can put a copy of Bitcoin D running and you can run your business from there and serve the entire world, which is billions of people. And of course, in those jurisdictions, all of the software development and other skills that are needed to run these kinds of businesses will be developed and entrenched. And the Luddite countries, the laggard countries, the Loomis countries are going to be left out. And no real American wants that. If you want America to be the number one country for Bitcoin, you have to take a step back. Stop trying to force the baby out. Women are very good at producing babies. The forceps are many times not necessary. They say there's a population problem on Earth. Most of the children on Earth are not born in hospitals. And so it's the same kind of thing. Government is not needed to make Bitcoin a success. This is the fundamental error these people are making. They think that they're needed to make any kind of magic happen in Bitcoin. They're not needed. And whilst I have sympathy for people who have a need to be needed, you cannot use your problems, your psychological problems, as a pretext to get in the way of normal people who just want to get things done and serve other people. So if America is to be the number one country for Bitcoin, it has to follow the Constitution. People who have sworn an oath, a solemn oath, to obey the Constitution must obey the Constitution. They don't have a choice. It's not optional. And I'm afraid that leaves restriction of Bitcoin, regulation of Bitcoin, out of the possibility of things that they're able to do. And once again, if not, well, you're going to take the consequences of that and lose the position of the premier country for Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is going to outlast everybody who's watching this program. You and me, Opti and Nico, are all going to be things of the past when the last block is mined and there's still people on Earth who are using Bitcoin. So the things that we're doing today are going to have a long-term impact in the future on how Bitcoin is mediated. But in the end, I think that our ideas are going to be the dominant ones, because the two futures where there's a big state and Bitcoin being the only money are actually impossible to be in the same reality at once. So if Bitcoin does what it's designed to do, it's going to be corrosive to the regulating state and the state interfering in everybody's business, which is part of the reason why it was written. So it's very important now if we want in the short term for America to win, to wake up, smell the coffee, stop interfering in other people's business, and run the court systems and everything else that they have authority to run, and not to interfere with the people who are running the Bitcoin businesses. And I just read now that Great Britain has decided to enter into this ridiculous and stupid synthetic war with Russia. I really do hope that President Trump is able to stop this, because
Absolutely.
If some kind of nonsense nuclear war goes off, then everything we've been talking about today is not going to happen.
Yeah, it would just ruin the 2025 cycle. That'd be a huge letdown. And not only and also destroy planet Earth. So nukes are bad. Bitcoin fixes this. The separation of money and state fixes this. We are getting to the top of the hour. I do want to give a extremely special shout out to our very special guest today, Akin Fernadez, founder of Azteco. You can go visit them at azte.co. They're Bitcoin vouchers for every bit of life. So go check them out. I'm your host, Nico. It's my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields. Our guest today, again, is Akin Fernadez, also known as Beautyon. We are Simply Bitcoin. If you guys enjoyed the show, make sure to smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we provided you value. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode. Peace out, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.